The moment you stop needing approval, some people will call you different, like it's an insult. You didn't become cold, you just stopped performing, and now the room feels quieter around you. By the end, you'll understand why spiritual awakening can cost friendships and how to handle it without becoming bitter. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt more peaceful inside while your social world started to feel strangely unsafe? Here's what this video is really about. Not halos, not being above people, and not becoming a loner as a personality. It's about what happens when your identity changes faster than your environment can update. When you begin to see your own ego patterns, your people-pleasing, your over-explaining, your need to be seen, and you loosen your grip on them. And that's when the friction starts, because friendships, group chats, family dinners, workplace jokes, they all run on invisible agreements, unspoken roles. You're the funny one. You're the listener. You always say yes. You never challenge the group. The moment you change, the agreement gets violated, without anyone ever admitting there was an agreement in the first place. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through three things. First, the core concept, why awakening isn't some magical upgrade, but a shift in what you're no longer willing to trade your peace for, and why that can trigger loss. Second, the first reveal, why some people don't actually miss you. They miss the version of you that made them feel comfortable. That sounds harsh, but stay with me. There's a compassionate way to see it. Third, we'll go through two realistic scenes, one in a friend's group and one in solitude, because loneliness is often where the real test happens, not when people leave, but when you don't chase them. And at the end, you'll get a simple ethical framework. 3 to 5 rules you can apply immediately. No mind games, no superiority. Just a clean way to keep your heart open and your boundaries real. Because here's the trap. When you lose friends, you can mistake it for proof you're too awake for everyone. And that's just ego wearing a spiritual mask. Or you can mistake it for proof you're unlovable and you go back to performing. We're not doing either. We're going to learn what to do when your life gets quieter, your circle gets smaller, and your inner world gets clearer. Hold that thought, because the most painful part isn't the loss itself. It's the confusion. It's the way you start scanning your memories like a detective. Did I do something wrong? Did I become arrogant? Should I explain myself? And that impulse to over-explain might be the exact thing you're being asked to outgrow. We'll start with a simple definition. Then we'll expose the pattern. Then we'll give you a way through it. Because the real problem isn't what you think. Spiritual awakening in simple terms is this. You notice you are not your reactions and you stop letting those reactions run your life. That's it. Not mystical, not special, just awareness. Someone like Alan Watts often pointed toward this idea. The ego is a useful tool, but a terrible master. When you see that, you don't need to defend an image every moment. You don't need to win every conversation. You don't need to be right in order to feel safe. And that changes how you show up. Here's the metaphor. A mask. For years, you wear a mask that fits your environment. It's not fake in a dramatic way. It's practical. It helps you belong. It keeps things smooth. It avoids conflict. It gets laughs. It gets likes. It gets invitations. But one day, you realize the mask is heavy. Not because the people are evil, because the mask was built from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being rejected. Fear of being alone with yourself. So, you loosen it. And the moment you loosen it, people notice. Not consciously at first. They just feel it. You talk less. You react slower. You don't rush to fix the mood. On screen, the ego reacts. And here comes the first reveal. You don't lose friends just because you changed. You lose friends because the old version of you was part of their emotional system. Some friendships are not just connection, they are regulation. The group uses roles to stay stable. When you stop playing your role, you create uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. So the group will try to restore the old balance. Not always with cruelty, sometimes with jokes, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with, "We miss the old you." Sometimes with silence. And this is where many people get it wrong. They think awakening is about leaving people behind. But the real test is, can you stop performing without becoming cold? Because the ego, when threatened, has two favorite exits. Go back to the mask. Put on a new mask called I'm above this. Both are still masks. The deeper move is simpler. You stay kind, but you stop negotiating your inner peace. You become less predictable to people who benefited from your predictability. And that's why this can feel like loss. Here's another quiet truth. When you become more present, you become harder to manipulate. Not because you learned a tactic, but because you no longer need to be controlled by approval. And that can accidentally expose the hidden dynamics in your friendships. The jokes that weren't jokes. The one-sided support. The subtle punishments when you set limits. Hold that thought. Because your goal isn't to diagnose everyone or to label people as toxic. Your goal is to see the pattern clearly, so you don't abandon yourself trying to keep everyone comfortable. And once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. You get calmer, and the group gets louder. You start speaking with more care. You stop matching chaos with chaos. You stop laughing at things that feel mean. You stop turning your pain into entertainment. And somehow, that triggers people. They say you're boring. They say you're acting deep. They say, why are you so quiet lately? On screen, the real trap. Reason. The group is not reacting to your spirituality. They're reacting to a loss of control. Not control like a villain, but control like a habit. When you were easy to predict, people felt safe. They knew how to get a response out of you. They knew how to pull you back into the old energy. They knew what version of you would show up. When you change, they have to face something. Their influence is smaller than they thought. And for many people, that feels like rejection. So they try to bring you back, using the language of friendship. Come on, don't be like that. We're just joking. Why are you being so sensitive? You used to understand. Notice the move. They frame your boundary as a personality flaw. This is not always malicious. Sometimes it's just discomfort. Sometimes it's fear that you're leaving them behind. But the effect is the same. You feel pressure to return to your role. Imagine a familiar hangout, a table, the same jokes, the same stories, the same unspoken competition. Someone makes a joke at someone else's expense. Everyone laughs the way they always do. It's automatic, like a reflex. But you don't laugh, not in a dramatic way. You just don't. A small silence appears. Someone notices and says, "What? Too good for us now?" You smile gently. You say something simple like, "No, I'm here. I just don't feel like laughing at that." And suddenly, the air changes. It's not about the joke anymore. It's about your refusal to join the old ritual. Now you're different. Now you're judging. Now you're not fun. And you can feel the instinct rise in you. Fix it. Explain yourself. Make them comfortable again. That moment, right there, is where awakening becomes real life. Because the old you would trade peace for belonging without even realizing it. The new you pauses. You let the discomfort exist. You don't punish them. You don't preach. You don't withdraw with a cold face. You just stay steady. And that steadiness is unfamiliar. It threatens the old agreement. Here's the twist. The more calmly you hold your boundary, the more the room reveals who respects you and who only liked your compliance. Hold that thought, because the next pattern isn't loud like a group joke. It's quiet, and it's the one that breaks people. This is where most people get it wrong. You stop chasing, and people disappear. No fight, no argument, just a slow fading. You notice you're the one who initiates. You're the one who checks in. You're the one who apologizes first. You're the one who keeps the bridge alive. Then you stop, not as a test, not as a trick, just as an experiment in honesty. And the silence answers you. Some friendships are maintained by your anxiety. The anxiety that says, if I don't keep this alive, I'll be forgotten. If you've been a people pleaser, you learned love as effort. You learned connection as earning. When you become more awake, you start seeing that effort clearly. You realize you've been paying emotional rent for a place you don't even own. So you stop paying. And the relationship reveals what it truly was, mutual or managed. This hurts not because you're superior. It hurts because you're human. The nervous system doesn't like social loss, even when the loss is necessary. Here's another thing. When you become calmer, you stop giving people constant emotional feedback. You stop rewarding small bids for attention with big reactions. You stop feeding drama with energy. And some people interpret that as you becoming distant. But what's really happening is you're no longer available for emotional chaos as a bonding method. Picture a night where you're alone. No notifications, no plans, just quiet. You sit with that quiet, and it feels like standing in an empty house you've never explored. You scroll, then stop. You reach for your phone, then put it down. You feel the urge to message someone, anyone, just to prove you still exist in someone's world. But you don't. You breathe. And then something uncomfortable rises. Grief. Grief for how much of your social life was built on fear. Grief for how often you bent yourself into a shape that fit. Grief for the version of you that tried so hard to be chosen. And in that grief, a new question appears, very quietly. What if I don't need to be validated to be real? This is the lonely part of awakening nobody romanticizes. It's not all peace. It's withdrawal from old cravings. And your mind will try to label that withdrawal as depression or failure or something is wrong with me. But sometimes it's just detox, not from people, detox from the addiction to being liked. Now here's the twist. If you can stay with this solitude without turning it into bitterness, you come out with something rare, self-trust. And when you have self-trust, you stop begging friendships to prove your worth. You choose, not from ego, from clarity. Hold that thought, because the final act is where we turn this into an ethical framework you can live by. This is where the story stops being painful and starts becoming power. You become real, and the right people feel closer. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's one person who stays, one person who doesn't punish your growth, one person who feels relief around your steadiness. Reason. The deepest truth is this. Awakening doesn't make you lose friends. It makes you lose the relationships that required you to be asleep. Not asleep as an insult, as a metaphor, as in unaware of your own needs, unaware of how often you abandoned yourself to keep peace, unaware of how often you traded honesty for acceptance. And when you stop doing that, some connections can't survive, not because you're wrong, but because the foundation was never mutual freedom. Imagine you're back in that friend setting weeks later. The energy is similar. The old jokes return. This time, you don't brace yourself. You don't rehearse speeches in your head. You don't come prepared to defend your new self. You're just present. Someone tries the same line. You've changed, and you nod, calmly. You say, "Yeah, I hope so." Not angry, not proud, just honest. The room pauses, and something interesting happens. One person smiles, not because they're mocking you, but because they recognize courage. After the hangout, they message you privately. They say, "I've been feeling the same way. I just didn't know how to say it." That's how it often goes. Your growth threatens some people, but it also gives others permission. Now, here are the practical takeaways. Ethical, grounded, real. Hold boundaries without anger. You don't need to punish people to protect your peace. Simple lines are enough. "I'm not into that." "I'm not available for this." Calm is a boundary. Explain less. Observe more. Over-explaining is often anxiety in disguise. If someone wants to understand you, they'll ask with respect. If they want control, no explanation will satisfy them. Don't confuse loneliness with wrongdoing. When your circle shrinks, your nervous system panics. Let it panic without obeying it. Quiet seasons are often where identity becomes real. Choose relationships that don't require performance. A healthy connection can handle your no. It can handle your growth. It doesn't demand you stay the same to stay loved. Stay humble. Don't turn awakening into superiority. If you start thinking, "I'm awake," and they're not, you're back in the ego game, just wearing a different outfit. Keep your heart soft. And here's your closing loop, the identity shift. If you're losing people because you're becoming honest, calmer, and more aligned, you're not failing. You're graduating softly, quietly, without applause. If this hits something real in you, you'll probably like this channel because we talk about the unseen patterns that shape human behavior without turning you into someone you don't want to be. You can subscribe if you want more of this kind of calm clarity. And remember, not everyone who leaves is a loss. Some are the cost of becoming yourself.